This is Craziest HOA Moments. Let me set the scene in one breath. I work as a property appraiser in Detroit, and I know exactly what a lien does to home value. So when Laura Jones, the gate access administrator for Ironwood Trails HOA board, shoved a clipboard in a clear sleeve at my chest in the parking lot and told me I had until tomorrow to pay a fine that did not exist 3 days ago, I knew this was not about compliance. This was about control. She leaned in close, her retractable badge reel with a blank card bouncing against her blue blazer, and said, "You signed the covenants. Now you live the covenants." I could smell the coffee on her breath. Behind her, a tow truck idled at the curb, engine rumbling, driver watching us through the windshield. She tapped the clipboard twice. "The fine schedule changes at the first of the month, and the deadline is tomorrow. If you do not pay, we tow." I did not move. I just stared at the clipboard, then at her, then at the tow truck. The driver leaned out. "Lady, you want me to hook it or not?" Laura turned and waved him off without looking back at me. "Not yet." Then she spun back around, clipboard still raised like a weapon. "But soon." That morning started normal. I left my house in the Ironwood Trails subdivision at 6, same as always, brown work shirt still damp from the shower, green bucket hat pulled low. I threw my backpack strap with a camera case inside over one shoulder and headed for my truck. The neighborhood was quiet, post-storm calm with puddles scattered across the asphalt and a few soggy papers stuck to the curb. The kind of morning where you think nothing will go wrong. I was halfway to the truck when I saw Laura standing next to it, arms crossed, gray sun hat tipped back, blonde shoulder-length wavy hair catching the early light. She was holding a folded printed agenda packet in one hand and tapping it against her palm. I stopped. "What is this about?" She smiled, but it was not friendly. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment. "We need to talk about your guest parking violation from last month." I blinked. "Last month?" She unfolded the packet, flipped to a page with a bright orange stamp across the top, and held it up. I could not read the text, but I recognized the stamp. It was the same one she used to mark my photos as non-compliant every time I submitted anything for approval. "You had an unauthorized vehicle in the guest spot for 4 consecutive nights," she said. "That is a $200 fine per night. $800 total." I felt my jaw tighten. I did not have anyone park there last month. She tilted her head. "We have records." "Do you?" I asked. She tapped the agenda packet again. "Right here." "I need to see those records," I said. She folded the packet back up and tucked it under her arm. "You can request them through the management company. Standard process. I will need proof in the format we specified in the enforcement policy." I pulled my phone out. "What format?" She waved a hand. "Check the portal. It is all there. But the deadline is tomorrow, so you better move fast." I went straight to the HOA portal when I got home that night. I logged in, clicked through to the enforcement section, and read the policy. Nowhere did it say anything about a guest parking violation from last month. Nowhere did it mention a format requirement for proof. I took a screenshot, then opened my email and found the original enforcement policy I had saved from 2 years ago when I moved in. I compared them side by side. The new version had been updated 3 weeks ago. The old version did not mention guest parking at all. Someone had added it quietly, buried in a paragraph about repeat violations, and backdated the enforcement window to include the previous month. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. This was not new. A year ago, a neighbor down the street, Marcus, got hit with a towing fee after Laura claimed his work truck violated the commercial vehicle ban. He fought it, filed a complaint, and the board dropped it without explanation. 2 weeks later, his mail started getting delayed, his gate code stopped working randomly, and someone kept reporting his trash cans as a violation every single week. He moved out 6 months later. Before he left, he knocked on my door and said, "If they ever come after you, do not let them bury it." They have done this before, and they will do it again. I remember asking him what he meant, and he just shook his head. Check the old minutes. Something does not add up. Then he left, and I never followed up. Until now. I pulled up the HOA meeting minutes archive on the portal and started scrolling backward. June 2023. May 2023. April 2023. I was looking for anything related to Marcus, anything about a towing policy change, anything that felt off. Then I found it. March 2023 minutes. There was a line item about a vendor contract renewal with a local tow company. The motion passed unanimously. But when I clicked the attachment to see the contract details, the file was missing. Just a broken link. I tried 2 more months. February 2023, January 2023. Same thing. Every towing-related attachment was gone. I opened a new tab and searched my email for any neighborhood newsletters from that time. I found one from March 15, 2023, sent by the previous board president before Laura took over the gate access role. It mentioned a special meeting to discuss towing procedures and invited homeowners to submit feedback. I did not remember going, but I remembered seeing the email. I clicked the link to the meeting recording. Error 404. Deleted. I sat there staring at the screen, and something clicked. This was not just about my fine. This was a pattern. Laura was erasing the evidence as she went, and she had been doing it for at least 2 years. The next morning, I called the management company. I got a bored-sounding receptionist who transferred me 3 times before I reached someone who claimed to handle enforcement. I explained the situation, the missing minutes, the backdated policy, the broken links. The woman on the other end sighed. "Sir, if you want to dispute a fine, you need to submit a formal appeal with supporting documentation." "I have documentation," I said. "I have screenshots showing the policy changed 3 weeks ago and the fine is being applied retroactively." She paused. "What format are your screenshots in?" I felt my stomach drop. "What?" She repeated herself slowly. "What format are your screenshots in?" "We require all evidence to be submitted as notarized affidavits with original timestamps certified by a third party." I closed my eyes. That was not in the policy I read. She clicked her tongue. "It is in the updated enforcement manual. You can download it from the portal." "When was it updated?" I asked. She did not answer right away. "Let me check." I heard typing. "Looks like the manual was revised on the 18th of last month." I pulled up my calendar. The 18th was 2 days after Marcus moved out. Of course it was. I thanked her and hung up. I spent the rest of the day gathering what I could. I printed the old enforcement policy, the new one, the email newsletter from March 2023, and my own photos from last month showing my driveway and guest spot both empty on the nights Laura claimed I had a violation. I also pulled my truck's GPS history from my insurance app. It showed I was parked in my own driveway every single night that month. No guest vehicles. No violations. I put it all in a binder, tabbed and labeled, and drove to the management office. When I walked in, the receptionist barely looked up. "I need to file a formal appeal," I said. She slid a form across the counter without a word. I filled it out, attached the binder, and handed it back. She glanced at it, then looked up. "This is not notarized." "I know," I said. "I was told I needed to submit supporting documentation." "You were told wrong," she said. She pushed the binder back toward me. "You need notarized affidavits for any photographic or digital evidence." I leaned on the counter. "Where is that written?" She pointed to a plastic sleeve taped to the wall behind her. I walked over and read the notice. It was dated 3 days ago. Of course it was. I left the office and sat in my truck in the parking lot. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You have 24 hours. I stared at it, then deleted it. 2 minutes later, another text. Same number. "This is your final warning." I took a screenshot and saved it. Then I called Marcus. It rang 4 times before he picked up. "Marcus, it is me, from Ironwood Trails." There was a long pause. "What do you want?" I told him everything. The fine, the backdated policy, the missing minutes, the notarization trap. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "They did the same thing to me. Exactly the same." I waited. He continued, "I had proof my truck was not commercial. I had the registration, the insurance docs, everything. Laura kept changing the requirements every time I submitted something. First, she wanted photos. Then she wanted a notarized letter from my employer. Then she wanted proof the truck was not used for business on HOA property, which made no sense because I parked it in my own driveway. I finally got everything she asked for, submitted it, and she said it was not in the right format. I asked what format she wanted, and she said she would email me the instructions. She never did. 2 weeks later, they towed my truck. Cost me $400 to get it out, plus the fine. I tried to fight it at the next board meeting, and Laura said the tow company had authorization on file and there was nothing she could do. When I asked to see the authorization, she said it was proprietary vendor information and could not be disclosed. I felt my hands tighten on the steering wheel. "Did you ever see the authorization?" "No," Marcus said, "but I did talk to the tow yard after I got my truck back. The clerk there told me the authorization slip did not match their normal format. He said it looked like someone typed it up in Word and printed it on plain paper. No letterhead, no signature." He told me off the record that they only took the job because Laura called them directly and said the board president approved it. When I asked the board president about it later, he said he never approved any towing. He did not even know it happened until I brought it up. "So who authorized it?" I asked. Marcus laughed bitterly. "Laura did. She has been doing it for years. She adds herself as the enforcement contact, processes violations without board approval, and by the time anyone notices, the money is already gone and the records are cleaned up." I asked him if he still had any of his paperwork. He said no, he threw it all out when he moved, but he remembered the tow company name. I wrote it down. I called the tow yard that afternoon. A gruff voice answered on the second ring. "Yeah." I explained who I was and asked if they kept records of authorization slips for HOA tows. The voice softened slightly. "We keep them for 3 years. Why?" I told him I was disputing a fine and needed to verify the authorization format. He grunted. "You are not the first person from that HOA to call." He put me on hold. I waited, listening to hold music that sounded like it was recorded in 1987. 2 minutes later, he came back. "I got the file here. March 2023. "Work truck, right?" "That is the one," I said. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Yeah, this slip is weird. It does not match our usual template. No case number, no board signature, just a name and a phone number." "Laura Jones?" I asked. He paused. "How did you know?" "Because she is doing it again," I said. "Can you confirm that on speaker if I record this?" He hesitated. "I do not want trouble with the HOA." "You will not get any," I said. "I just need you to confirm the format does not match your normal process. If this goes sideways, I will keep you out of it." Another pause. Then he said, "Fine. Call me back in 10 minutes and I will have my dispatcher on the line. She is the one who took the call. She remembers it." 10 minutes later, I called back. The dispatcher answered and the tow yard manager conferenced her in. I hit record on my phone. I explained the situation again and the dispatcher listened quietly. When I finished, she said, "I remember that call. March 14th, 2023. Woman called, said she was the HOA enforcement officer, said they needed a commercial truck towed immediately for covenant violations. I asked for the authorization paperwork, and she said she would fax it. I told her we needed a board signature and a case number. She said the board president was unavailable and she had signing authority for emergency enforcement. I told her that was not standard, and she got really pushy. Said if we did not tow it by end of day, they would switch to a different vendor. So I took the job. When the paperwork came through, it was just a plain sheet with her name and a phone number. No board letterhead. No signature. I flagged it internally, but my boss said to process it anyway because we did not want to lose the contract. I felt a chill run through me. Do you still have the fax? She hesitated. We should. Let me check. I heard her typing. Yeah, I got it. Dated March 14, 2023, sent from a local print shop, not an HOA office. I wrote that down. Can you send me a copy? She paused. I will have to ask my boss. Give me your email. I gave her my email and hung up. 5 minutes later, the fax image hit my inbox. I opened it and stared. Plain paper, exactly as described. A single paragraph. Authorization to tow 2019 Ford F-250. License plate ending in 4729 from 1247 Ironwood Trail, Detroit, Michigan for violation of commercial vehicle restrictions per HOA Covenant Section 12. Contact Laura Jones at the number below for questions. No board signature. No case number. No date, just Laura's name and a phone number. I compared it to the current enforcement policy on the portal. Section 12 was added in the revision 3 weeks ago. It did not exist in March 2023. Laura had backdated the covenant itself. I printed the fax, added it to my binder, and drove straight to the city planning office. I needed to pull the original HOA covenant documents on file with the county. If Section 12 was added later, there would be a record of the amendment filing. The clerk at the counter was a middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a chain. She looked up when I walked in. What do you need? I need the recorded covenants for Ironwood Trails HOA, I said. She typed into her computer, then frowned. We have the original filing from 1998 and one amendment from 2011. Nothing after that. Can I see both? She printed them and handed them over. I flipped through the original covenants. Section 12 was about landscaping standards, nothing about commercial vehicles. I checked the 2011 amendment. It added a section about fence heights, still nothing about vehicles. I looked up at the clerk. If the HOA wanted to add a new restriction, they would have to file an amendment with the county, right? She nodded. And it would show up in this system? She nodded again. So if Section 12 is about commercial vehicles now, but it is not in these filings, that means the amendment was never recorded. She adjusted her glasses. That would mean the restriction is not legally enforceable. I smiled for the first time in 2 days. Can I get certified copies of these? She charged me $12 and handed me the copies in a sealed envelope with a county stamp. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and laid everything out. The old enforcement policy, the new one with the backdated revision, the fax from the tow yard with Laura's name but no board signature. The certified covenant copies showing Section 12 did not exist as a vehicle restriction. The GPS data from my truck showing I never had a guest vehicle. The email newsletter from March 2023 promising transparency on towing procedures, followed by missing minutes and deleted recordings. The timeline was clear. Laura had been staging violations, authorizing tows without board approval, collecting fines that were not legally enforceable, and erasing the evidence behind her. The cold case Marcus told me to check was not just his. It was everyone who had ever challenged her and lost. I went back through my photos from the last 2 years. Every time I submitted something for approval, landscaping, paint colors, fence repair, Laura had stamped it with that bright orange stamp and sent it back with a denial. I pulled up my email archive and searched for her name. 43 emails. In every single one, she either moved the goalpost, demanded a new format, or cited a rule that did not exist in the original covenants. I opened the HOA portal and checked the enforcement log. My name appeared 6 times in the last 18 months. Every single entry was marked resolved, but I had never been notified of any of them. I clicked on the first one. March 2024. Landscaping violation, overgrown shrubs. I looked at the date. I was out of town that week for work. I did not even have overgrown shrubs. I clicked on the next one. July 2024. Trash cans visible from street. I kept my cans in the garage. I clicked through the rest. Every single entry was fabricated. If you are enjoying this, make sure to like and subscribe so you do not miss the next story. I opened a new document and started typing. I listed every violation Laura had filed against me, every policy change that backdated enforcement, every missing minute and deleted recording, every piece of evidence showing she was operating outside board oversight. Then I added Marcus's case, the tow authorization with no board signature, the fax from a print shop instead of an HOA office, the dispatcher's statement that Laura pressured them into processing it without proper paperwork. I included the certified covenant copies showing the restrictions Laura cited did not legally exist. I saved it, printed it, and added it to the binder. Then I emailed a copy to myself, uploaded it to a cloud drive, and sent a link to Marcus with a note, "If anything happens to me, you know what to do." The next morning, I got another text from the unknown number. "Last chance. Pay the fine or we proceed with collections." I did not respond. Instead, I drove to the HOA office. It was a small building on the edge of the neighborhood, barely bigger than a storage unit, with a faded ironwood trail sign out front. I parked and walked to the door. It was locked. A note taped to the glass said office hours were Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 to 2. It was Wednesday. I took a photo of the note, then walked around the building. There was a single window on the side covered with blinds, but I could see a light on inside. I knocked on the glass. No answer. I knocked again, louder. The blinds shifted, and I saw Laura's face appear for a second before she let them drop. The door stayed locked. I stood there for a minute, then pulled out my phone and called the management company. Same receptionist. I asked to speak to someone about office hours. She transferred me. A man answered this time, annoyed. "What?" I explained I went to the HOA office during posted hours and it was locked. He sighed. "The office manager sets her own schedule. If she is not there, try back later. The posted hours say Tuesdays and Thursdays," I said. He did not respond right away. Then he said, "Look, if you have a complaint, file it in writing." "I am filing it now," I said. The office was locked outside of posted hours, and I saw someone inside who refused to open the door. That is a violation of the open records policy. He paused. "Who did you see inside?" "Laura Jones," I said. Another pause, longer this time. "I will pass that along." He hung up. I waited in the parking lot. 20 minutes later, Laura came out the front door, clipboard in hand, badge reel swinging. She saw me and stopped. She did not say anything, just stood there staring. I got out of my truck and walked toward her. I was halfway across the lot when she held up the clipboard like a shield. "You need to leave," she said. "This is HOA property." I stopped about 10 feet away. "I came during posted office hours," I said. The door was locked. She shook her head. "Office hours are by appointment only now." "Since when?" "Since the board updated the policy last week." I pulled out my phone and opened the portal. "I do not see that on the website." She waved a hand. "It is pending upload. You need to leave, or I will call security." "What security?" I asked. "We do not have security." She pulled out her phone and held it up like she was about to dial. I took a step closer. "I am not leaving until you explain why you filed 6 fake violations against me and authorized a tow for Marcus without board approval." Her face went red. "Those violations were legitimate, and I do not have to explain anything to you." "You do if you want to avoid a lawsuit," I said. She lowered her phone slightly. "What are you talking about?" I held up the binder. "I have the tow authorization from March 2023 with your name on it and no board signature. I have the county covenant filing showing Section 12 does not exist as a vehicle restriction. I have the policy revisions you backdated to cover your tracks. I have the fax from a print shop instead of an HOA office. I have a recorded statement from the tow yard dispatcher confirming you pressured them into processing an improper authorization. And I have a timeline showing you have been doing this for at least 2 years. She stared at me, then at the binder, then back at me. Her mouth opened, then closed. Then she said, "I do not need proof, I have paperwork and vibes." I blinked. What? She straightened up, clipboard back in position. You think you can come in here with your little binder and your accusations and make me look bad? I have been enforcing these covenants for 3 years, and no one has ever questioned me. That is because you erased the records, I said. She smiled, and it was the coldest thing I had ever seen. Prove it. I opened the binder and pulled out the certified covenant copies. I held them up so she could see the county seal. These are the recorded covenants. Section 12 is about landscaping, not vehicles. Your commercial vehicle ban does not exist. She glanced at the papers, then looked away. That is an outdated filing. We amended it. Show me the amendment filing, I said. She did not answer. I pulled out the tow authorization fax. This is the paperwork you sent to the tow yard in March 2023. No board signature, no case number, sent from a print shop. The dispatcher confirmed you pressured them into processing it without proper authorization. Laura's face was getting redder. That is hearsay. It is a recorded statement, I said. I pulled out my phone and held it up. She took a step back. You recorded me? Not you, I said. The tow yard. But I can start recording you if you want. She looked around the parking lot like she was searching for backup. There was no one. Just us, the puddles, and the scattered papers stuck to the pavement. She turned back to me and pointed the clipboard at my chest. You are harassing me. This is witness intimidation. I stayed calm. I am standing in a public parking lot asking you questions about HOA enforcement. That is not harassment. She tapped the clipboard against her palm. You need to leave now, or I will file a restraining order. For what? I asked. She did not answer. She just turned and walked back toward the office. I called after her. I am filing a formal complaint with the board, and I am requesting an independent audit of every enforcement action you have processed in the last 3 years. She stopped at the door, hand on the handle, and looked back. Good luck with that. Then she went inside and locked the door behind her. I stood there for a minute, then got back in my truck. I pulled out my phone and called the one board member I knew who was not in Laura's pocket. His name was Gene, and he had been on the board for 5 years. He was quiet, rarely spoke at meetings, but he always voted against Laura when she tried to push through fee increases or policy changes without proper notice. He answered on the 3rd ring. Gene, it is me, from Ironwood Trails. I need to talk to you. He sighed. About Laura? Yes. He was quiet for a moment, then said, meet me at the coffee shop on 8 Mile in 20 minutes. Do not tell anyone. I got there first and ordered a black coffee. Gene showed up 10 minutes later, looking nervous. He sat down across from me and did not order anything. What do you have? He asked. I slid the binder across the table. He opened it and started flipping through the pages. His face got paler with every page. When he reached the tow authorization fax, he stopped and looked up. Where did you get this? The tow yard, I said. They kept a copy. He stared at it, then closed the binder and pushed it back toward me. This is bad. I know. He shook his head. No, you do not understand. This is worse than bad. If this gets out, the entire board is liable. We approved Laura as the enforcement contact 2 years ago without proper oversight. If she has been filing fake violations and authorizing vendor actions without board votes, we are all on the hook. That is why I need you to testify, I said. He looked at me like I had just asked him to jump off a bridge. Testify where? At the next board meeting, I said. Or an independent hearing. Somewhere on record. He laughed bitterly. You think the board is going to allow an independent hearing? Laura controls the agenda. She sets the meeting times. She approves the minutes. If you try to bring this up at a meeting, she will shut you down, claim you are out of order, and move on. I leaned forward. Then we go over her head. We file a complaint with the state, or we bring in an attorney, or we go to the county." He shook his head again. "I am not testifying. I have 2 years left on my term, and I am not making myself a target." I stared at him. "So you are just going to let her keep doing this?" He stood up. "I am sorry. I really am. But I have a family, and I am not risking my home over this. Good luck." He walked out. I sat there for a minute staring at the binder. Then I called Marcus again. He picked up on the first ring. "Did you talk to Gene?" I asked. Marcus laughed. "Yeah. 2 years ago. He said the same thing to me. Did you ever talk to anyone else on the board?" "I tried," Marcus said. 3 of them would not return my calls. One told me to drop it or I would regret it. The 5th one, the president at the time, said he would look into it. 2 weeks later, he resigned. Laura took over his duties until the next election, and by then everyone was too scared to run against her. "So she has been in control for 2 years. "Pretty much," Marcus said, "and she has been cleaning up the records the whole time." I thought about the missing minutes, the deleted recordings, the backdated policies. "How do I stop her?" I asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You need something she cannot erase. Something public. Something she cannot deny." "Like what?" "I do not know," he said. "But if you figure it out, let me know. I want to watch." I spent the rest of the day putting together a plan. I could not go to the board, Gene made that clear. I could not go to the management company, they were in Laura's pocket. I could not go to the county, because the covenants were not filed properly, and the county would just tell me it was an internal HOA matter. I needed to force Laura into a position where she could not move the goalposts, could not change the rules, and could not erase the evidence. I needed to trap her in a moment where the proof was undeniable and witnesses were watching. The answer came to me that night. The HOA had a policy, buried in the bylaws, that allowed any homeowner to request a special hearing if they had evidence of board misconduct. The hearing had to be open to all homeowners, recorded, and conducted by a neutral third party if the complaint involved a board member. Laura was not technically a board member, she was staff, but she acted with board authority as the enforcement contact. If I could prove she was exceeding her authority, the board would be forced to respond. And if I requested the hearing in writing, with copies to every homeowner in the neighborhood, Laura could not bury it. I drafted the complaint that night. I listed every fake violation, every backdated policy, every missing record, every unauthorized vendor action. I attached copies of the evidence, the tow authorization, the covenant filings, the recorded dispatcher statement, the GPS data, the email trail showing Laura moving goalposts. I included a formal request for a neutral hearing officer and a full audit of all enforcement actions processed under Laura's authority in the last 3 years. Then I printed 120 copies, one for every house in Ironwood Trails, and spent the next morning hand-delivering them. I left one in every mailbox, tucked under every door, handed them directly to neighbors I saw outside. By noon, my phone was buzzing non-stop. Texts from people I had never met. "Did you really file this? Is this for real? I got hit with a fake violation last year." "Me too." My gate code stopped working after I complained. Same. Within 6 hours, I had a dozen people reach out offering to testify. The next day, I got a call from the management company. Different person this time, someone senior. She sounded stressed. "Mister, we received your complaint, and we need to schedule a meeting to discuss this privately." "No," I said. "The bylaws allow me to request a special hearing, and I am requesting one." She paused. "A special hearing requires board approval, not if the complaint involves board misconduct," I said. "Then it requires a neutral officer." She was quiet for a long moment. "Let me talk to the board and get back to you." 2 hours later, my phone rang again. Same woman. "The board has agreed to schedule a hearing. Next Tuesday at 7. Location to be determined." I wrote it down, then asked, "Who is the hearing officer?" She hesitated. "The board president will preside." "That is not neutral," I said. The complaint involves actions taken under board authority. You need an independent officer. She sighed. I will relay that. Another 2 hours passed. Then I got an email. The board has retained an outside attorney to serve as hearing officer. Hearing is confirmed for Tuesday at 7 at the clubhouse. All homeowners are invited to attend. I forwarded the email to Marcus with a note, it is happening. Tuesday came fast. I got to the clubhouse at 6:30, binder in hand, backpack strap with a camera case inside slung over one shoulder. The parking lot was already half full. I recognized some of the neighbors from my complaint delivery route. A few of them nodded at me as I walked past. Inside, the clubhouse was set up like a courtroom. Rows of folding chairs facing a long table at the front. The board members sat on one side. Laura sat at the far end, clipboard in front of her, badge reel clipped to her blazer. The attorney, a gray-haired man in a suit, sat in the middle. He looked bored. I took a seat in the front row. Marcus slipped in a few minutes later and sat next to me. He did not say anything, just gave me a nod. By 7, the room was packed, standing room only. The attorney called the meeting to order and read the complaint aloud. It took 10 minutes. When he finished, he looked up at me. Do you wish to present evidence? I stood up. Yes. I walked to the front and set the binder on the table. I opened it and pulled out the first document, the tow authorization fax. I held it up so everyone could see. This is the authorization Laura Jones sent to the tow yard in March 2023 to tow Marcus's truck. No board signature. No case number. Sent from a print shop. The tow yard dispatcher confirmed Laura pressured them into processing it without proper procedure. I passed the fax to the attorney. He looked at it, then at Laura. Laura, do you want to respond? She leaned forward, hands folded on the table. That authorization was processed under my enforcement authority granted by the board. The attorney frowned. Did the board vote to authorize that specific tow? Laura hesitated. The board granted me blanket authority to process violations as needed. The attorney looked at the board president. Is that accurate? The president, a thin man with glasses, shifted in his seat. We granted Laura authority to issue notices and fines, but not to authorize vendor actions without board approval. Laura's face went red. That is not what you said 2 years ago. The president did not respond. I pulled out the next document, the certified covenant copies. I held them up. These are the recorded covenants filed with the county. Section 12 is about landscaping standards. Laura has been citing Section 12 as a commercial vehicle ban, but that restriction does not exist in the filed covenants. I passed the copies to the attorney. He flipped through them, then looked at Laura. Do you have an amendment filing? Laura pulled a folder from under her clipboard and opened it. She slid a sheet across the table. This is the board resolution amending Section 12, passed in February 2023. The attorney picked it up and read it. Then he looked at me. Do you dispute this? I pulled out my phone and opened the county records portal. I turned the screen toward him. The county has no record of any amendment filing after 2011. If the board passed a resolution, it was never recorded. Without recording, it is not enforceable. The attorney looked at the board president again. Did you file this amendment with the county? The president looked at Laura. Laura was supposed to handle that. Laura's voice rose. I was told the board secretary would file it. The board secretary, a woman sitting 2 seats down, shook her head. That was never assigned to me. Laura slammed her hand on the table. This is ridiculous. You are all trying to cover for your own incompetence. The attorney raised a hand. Miss Jones, please. Laura stood up. No. I am not sitting here while he accuses me of fraud. I have enforced these covenants exactly as written, and if there is a paperwork issue, that is on the board, not me. The attorney looked at me. Do you have anything else? I pulled out the printed email trail showing Laura moving goalposts. I walked the attorney through it step by step. March 2024, I submitted landscaping photos for approval. Laura denied them and requested additional angles. I submitted those. She requested a notarized letter from my landscaper. I submitted that. She then said the photos did not meet the updated format requirements, which were not posted until after I submitted everything. I showed him the timestamps on my emails and the portal revision date. The two did not match. The attorney studied the emails, then looked at Laura. Why did the format requirements change after his submission? Laura crossed her arms. The format requirements are updated regularly to maintain consistency. So you changed the rules after he complied? She did not answer. The attorney made a note. Continue. I pulled out the GPS data from my truck showing I was in my driveway every night last month when Laura claimed I had a guest parking violation. I showed him the enforcement log entry Laura filed. It listed 4 consecutive nights. My GPS data showed I did not move my truck during those nights, and there was no guest vehicle. The attorney looked at Laura. Do you have proof of this violation? Laura pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photos. She held it up. I took these pictures myself. The attorney leaned forward. When? Laura glanced at the screen. Last month. The attorney asked for the date. Laura read it off. The attorney wrote it down, then looked at me. Do you have proof you were not there? I do, I said. But more importantly, the metadata on her photos will show when they were actually taken. If they were taken last month, the metadata will confirm it. If they were not, the metadata will show that too. Laura's hand dropped slightly. The attorney looked at her. May I see your phone? Laura hesitated, then said, I do not have to show you my phone. This is a privacy violation. The attorney frowned. Miss Jones, this is a hearing about enforcement procedures. If you are using photos as evidence of violations, the metadata is relevant. Laura stood up and grabbed her clipboard. I am not doing this. She turned and started walking toward the door. The attorney called after her. Miss Jones, if you leave, I will have to make a finding based on the evidence presented. Laura stopped at the door and turned around. Fine. Make your finding. You are all corrupt anyway. Someone in the crowd, one of the neighbors I had given a complaint copy to, called out, Laura, are you seriously walking out? If you have nothing to hide, just show the metadata. Laura spun toward the voice. You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants. The neighbor stood up. That does not answer the question. Laura pointed at her. Sit down or I will have you removed. The attorney raised his voice. Miss Jones, you do not have authority to remove anyone from this hearing. Laura stared at him, then looked around the room. Everyone was watching her. She looked trapped. Then she said, I do not need proof. I have paperwork and vibes. Someone in the back laughed. Laura's face went crimson. She grabbed the door handle and yanked it open. Wait, someone else called out. Do we get to vote on this? Laura froze. The attorney looked at the speaker. Vote on what? On whether we want a motion on record about Laura's behavior, the neighbor said. Laura turned slowly. You do not get to vote on anything. This is not a board meeting. The attorney corrected her. Actually, under the bylaws, any special hearing can include a homeowner motion if it is seconded and relevant to the complaint. Laura stared at him, then at the room. Someone in the third row raised a hand. I motion that we request a full audit of all enforcement actions Laura has processed in the last 3 years. Another hand shot up. I second. The attorney looked at Laura. Miss Jones, do you want to respond before I open the floor? Laura did not say anything. She just stood there, hands still on the door, clipboard dangling at her side. Then she turned and walked out. The door slammed behind her. The room erupted. People started talking all at once. The attorney banged a gavel I did not even know he had. Order, please. The noise died down. He looked at the board president. I am going to recommend that the board suspend Laura's enforcement authority pending an independent audit. I am also going to recommend that the board retain a neutral hearing officer for any future appeals involving her actions. The president nodded slowly. We will take that under advisement. The attorney looked at me. Do you have anything else to present? I pulled out the last document, the one I had been holding for this exact moment. It was a copy of the enforcement policy showing Laura was skipping required steps on purpose. I had found it buried in the board's own archived meeting minutes from 2022. before Laura took over. The policy clearly stated that any enforcement action had to include a written warning, a 14-day cure period, and a board vote before a fine could be issued. Laura had been skipping all 3 steps and issuing fines immediately. I stared at the letter and smiled, because it proved exactly what I suspected. I handed it to the attorney. This is the enforcement policy the board adopted in 2022. Laura has been ignoring it. The attorney read it, then looked at the board president. Is this still the active policy? The president looked uncomfortable. Yes. The attorney set the document down. Then every fine Laura has issued without following this procedure is invalid. The room went silent. Someone in the back whispered, "Holy shit." The attorney continued, I am going to recommend that the board reverse all fines issued under Laura's authority that did not follow this procedure and refund any payments already collected. I am also recommending that the board formally revoke Laura's signing authority and require board approval for all future enforcement actions. The president looked like he wanted to disappear. We will schedule an emergency board meeting to vote on your recommendations. The attorney nodded. I will send my full report by end of week. He banged the gavel again. This hearing is adjourned. People started standing up, talking, pulling out their phones. Marcus leaned over and said, "You actually did it." I did not answer. I just sat there staring at the documents spread across the table. The attorney walked over and handed me the binder. "You built a solid case," he said. I have seen a lot of HOA disputes, and this one is pretty clear-cut. If the board does not follow my recommendations, you should consider legal action. I nodded. He left. Gene, the board member who had refused to testify, walked up to me. He looked sheepish. "I should have helped you," he said. I shook my head. "You are helping now," he frowned. "What do you mean?" I nodded toward the attorney's retreating back. "He is recommending an audit. If you vote for it, that is enough." Gene looked around the room, then back at me. "I will vote for it." I walked out into the parking lot. It was dark now, the neighborhood quiet except for the sound of car doors closing and engines starting. I got in my truck and sat there for a minute. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Check the neighborhood group chat." I opened it. The chat was blowing up. People posting photos from the hearing, screenshots of the complaint I had delivered, links to the county covenant filings. Someone posted a video of Laura walking out. Another person posted a screenshot of the tow authorization fax. Someone else posted a long message about how Laura had targeted them 2 years ago and they were too scared to fight it. By the time I finished scrolling, there were over 100 messages. The next morning, I got a call from the management company, the same senior woman from before. "The board met last night," she said. "They voted to accept the attorney's recommendations. Laura's enforcement authority has been suspended, and all fines issued under her authority without board votes are being reversed. You should receive a refund check within 30 days. "What about the audit?" I asked. "The board is hiring an independent auditor. They expect the report in 60 days. And Laura?" She paused. "Laura resigned this morning." I felt something unclench in my chest. What happens now? "The board is interviewing candidates for a new enforcement coordinator," she said. "They are also revising the enforcement policy to require board oversight for all fines and vendor actions." I thanked her and hung up. 2 weeks later, I got another call. This time it was from Gene. "The audit is done," he said. "You need to see this." I met him at the coffee shop again. He brought a printed report, thick and bound, with tabs sticking out the side. I flipped through it. Page after page of violations Laura had filed without evidence, fines issued without warnings, vendor actions authorized without board votes. The auditor had found 47 separate cases where Laura exceeded her authority. 18 of those cases involved homeowners who had already paid fines and moved out, unable to fight back. The total amount of invalid fines collected was over $32,000. I looked up at Gene. "What is the board going to do?" He sighed. "They are setting up a restitution fund. Anyone who paid a fine under Laura's enforcement can file a claim. The board is also referring the case to the state attorney general for possible fraud charges. I stared at the report. And Laura? Gene shook his head. She is gone, moved out of state. The board sent a demand letter for the money she collected, but the attorney does not think we will see any of it. She is judgment-proof. I closed the report. At least it is over. Gene looked at me. It is over because you did not let her bury it. Most people would have just paid the fine and moved on. I thought about Marcus, about the neighbors who reached out after I delivered the complaint, about the 18 people who had already left and would never get their money back. I shook my head. It is not over until the board changes how this place runs. Gene nodded. They are working on it. The new enforcement coordinator starts next month, and the revised policy goes into effect at the same time. They are also setting up a homeowner oversight committee to review all enforcement actions before fines are issued. It is a start. A month later, the board held a special meeting to introduce the new enforcement coordinator and present the revised policy. I went, mostly out of curiosity. The new coordinator was a middle-aged man named Tom, former city code enforcement officer, with a reputation for being fair but firm. He stood at the front of the room and walked everyone through the new process. Every violation would start with a written warning and a photo. Homeowners would have 14 days to cure. If the violation was not cured, the case would go to the board for a vote before a fine was issued. All enforcement actions would be logged on the portal with timestamps and photos available for review. Homeowners could appeal any decision to a neutral hearing officer appointed by an independent mediation service. No more internal appeals. No more gatekeeping. Tom finished his presentation and opened the floor for questions. Someone asked what would happen if the board tried to bypass the process. Tom did not hesitate. I report directly to the homeowners, not the board. If the board tries to pressure me into skipping steps, I will resign and file a complaint with the state. The room was quiet for a moment. Then someone started clapping. It spread through the room until everyone was clapping. Tom looked uncomfortable but nodded. The meeting ended and people filed out. I stayed behind and walked up to Tom. I introduced myself and thanked him for taking the job. He shook my hand. I read the audit report, he said. What Laura did here was criminal. I am not going to let that happen again. I believed him. I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in months. The neighborhood looked different now, calmer, like the weight of Laura's enforcement reign had finally lifted. I pulled into my driveway and saw a folded piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. I got out and grabbed it. It was a handwritten note from a neighbor 3 houses down. Thank you for fighting this. My husband and I were planning to move because we could not deal with Laura anymore. Now we are staying. It was signed with their names and a smiley face. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. The restitution fund opened the following week. I filed a claim for the $800 fine Laura tried to collect from me. Within 2 weeks, I got a check in the mail with an apology letter from the board president. Marcus filed a claim too for the towing fee and the fine from 2023. He got his check a week later. The neighborhood group chat stayed active, but the tone shifted. Instead of complaints about Laura, people started posting about upcoming board elections, policy proposals, and volunteer opportunities for the new oversight committee. A few neighbors formed a records transparency group and started attending every board meeting to take notes and post summaries online. The board did not fight it. They welcomed it. 3 months after the hearing, I got a call from the state attorney general's office. An investigator wanted to interview me about Laura's enforcement actions. I met him at a government building downtown and walked him through everything: the fake violations, the backdated policies, the unauthorized tows, the missing records. He took notes and recorded the whole conversation. When we finished, he told me they were opening a formal investigation into Laura for fraud and misconduct in office. He said it would take time, but they had enough evidence to move forward. I asked if I would have to testify. He said probably, if it went to trial. I told him I would. He thanked me and walked me out. 6 months later, Marcus texted me a news article. Laura had been charged with multiple counts of fraud and theft by deception. The case was still pending, but the article quoted the Attorney General saying the investigation had uncovered a pattern of abuse in HOA enforcement across multiple neighborhoods, not just Ironwood Trails. Laura had worked for 2 other HOAs before ours, and both had similar complaints on file. The Attorney General was recommending new state oversight rules for HOA enforcement officers. Marcus added a comment under the link told you it was bigger than us. I read the article twice, then put my phone down. It was bigger than us, but it started with us. It started because Marcus told me to check the old minutes. It started because I did not let Laura bury it. It started because a tow yard clerk kept a fax and a dispatcher remembered a pushy phone call. It started because Gene finally voted for the audit. It started because 120 neighbors read a complaint and showed up to a hearing. That is how it works. You find the thread, you pull it, and you do not let go until the whole thing unravels. The board election happened in the fall. 3 new members ran on a transparency platform, and all 3 won. Gene kept his seat. The old board president did not run for re-election. The new board held their first meeting in November and voted unanimously to make all enforcement records publicly accessible on the portal, including historical logs going back 5 years. They also voted to require annual audits of all HOA financial accounts and enforcement activity. Tom, the enforcement coordinator, presented a mid-year report showing 0 invalid fines and a 98% compliance rate with the new process. People were actually curing violations because the warnings were clear and the deadlines were reasonable. The neighborhood felt different, lighter. Laura's shadow was gone, and people were not scared anymore. I ran into Gene at the grocery store a few weeks before Christmas. He was buying a turkey. We talked for a minute about the new board, the upcoming budget meeting, the plans to repave the common area roads. Then he said, "You ever think about running for the board?" I laughed. "No." He smiled. "You should. People trust you." I shook my head. "I am good. I just want to live here without worrying about fake fines." He nodded. "Fair enough. But if you change your mind, let me know. We need people who are not afraid to fight." I told him I would think about it, but I knew I would not. I had done my part. The rest was up to the neighborhood. I got home that night and sat on my porch with a beer. It was cold, the kind of Michigan cold that makes your breath fog and your fingers ache. The neighborhood was quiet. Christmas lights starting to go up on a few houses, kids playing in a yard down the street. My phone buzzed. A text from the attorney who had served as hearing officer. "Thought you would want to know, the state just adopted new HOA oversight rules based on your case. All enforcement coordinators have to be licensed and bonded now, and all fines over $200 require a neutral hearing. Your case made a difference." I read the text twice, then put my phone away. I did not need the recognition. I did not need people to know my name. I just needed to know that the next person Laura tried to target would have a way out. That the next Marcus would not have to move. That the next neighborhood would not have to live under someone who weaponized paperwork and vibes. A neutral hearing officer assigned so Karen cannot control appeals. That is what changed. Karen's timeline is proven false with timestamps. That is what broke her. The HOA drops the case to avoid a public records mess. That is what forced the audit. And Karen tries to storm out and someone asks for her motion on record. That is what made her realize she had lost. It was not one thing. It was all of it, stacked together until the weight was too much for her to carry. I finished my beer and went inside. My house was warm, the mortgage was stable, my insurance had not spiked because of a bogus lien threat. I had won. Not just for me, but for everyone Laura had targeted and everyone she would have targeted if someone had not pulled the thread. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next HOA story.